Hello friends, welcome to the old Bank of Johnston. I appreciate you joining me today. This is a monumental day for the most recent project, the windows. I say most recent because I've been working on it since February. I might have actually started doing a little bit of sanding or exploring what to do in January when my friend Paul was here helping out with the joists. It's been a while. There is a lot of preparation that has happened in this project. A lot, months worth. I've been doing other things to continue the forward motion of the whole project moving along. Like we saw in the last video of making the picture frame, took a small detour, but I did clean up that entire area, even vacuumed the ceiling, added a couple new circuits for fans. We don't have any air conditioning, so we use a lot of fans. And it keeps it pretty cool in here. It's not bad. Even on the hottest of days, it's not that bad. In the background of all those things, I've been working on these windows, and I've made a plan that has not quite come out exactly how I thought it would, but you know, that's the way it goes sometimes. I wanted to have a complete window or a couple of windows done before I made this video. And the preparation I found has taken a lot longer than what I anticipated because there was a lot of damage that was unseen when I first started the project. Then I started taking apart the window sill. Once I took apart the windowsill, I discovered that there was a lot of water damage and it all had to come apart, all the way down to the brick rough opening. And this was a good opportunity to see how the window went together. And once you know how it goes together, well, it makes it a lot easier to remake it and put it back. So although this looked like a lot of parts and pieces that needed to be replaced, I was able to save about 95% of all the wood in each of the windows, and mostly replacing the damaged wood around the sill area or the bottom part of the window. I began taking the pulleys apart, dropping the weights down into the wall, removing those and treating those with a rust remover. Then I sprayed oil all over each one of these just to preserve it, keep it from rusting too bad, making them work really efficiently. The pulleys are all original. If you've never seen a window like this, well, they're still out there. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, even up into the 50s and 60s, this type of window was pretty common. Most of the work occurred upstairs, but down here is where I spent about 2 weeks, right in this area, making these window sashes. Now these two over here didn't work out so well. They were miscut or not able to be used for one reason or the other. I can't quite remember on these two. But I just took the old windows and duplicated what I saw, came up with this. This bag of sawdust was completely empty when I started building the window sashes. So you can tell how much sawing I had to do in this area. It was quite a bit. This entire stack of wood is scraps from building the window sashes, nothing else. But I got a lot of good usable scraps here, even these thin pieces. I kept every little piece I could for projects in the future. Here's a good example of one of the sash rails that was unusable. You see here where the mortise is completely rotted out. That is an unusable piece. Even though I probably could have made this work somehow, this was one of the few that we replaced and I was able to use as a template. Here's a bottom rail for one of the sashes, completely rotted out. An interesting thing about these windows is that there are 3 different types of window up there. They're not all the same design, so I had to go by each one and figure out what type of window, how thick it was, what it was going to accommodate in the new design. Altogether, I spent about 2 solid weeks right here working on sashes. Once all of the window parts were made, I brought everything upstairs and began assembling the sashes using only dowels and wood glue. This was a longer process than what it probably had to have been, but I felt like it was the right thing to do, and so far the windows are looking really nice at this point. To fill any of the holes and cracks and imperfections in the wood, I'm using a wood hardener and then a 2-part wood epoxy. I'll show you more about that process in another video. Right now I'm going over all the what could be possible splinters and the sharp edges just lightly touching it with the sandpaper by hand, because if I go over it with the electric sander, it's just going to tear it up, make divots in it, be too deep. This wood is still pretty sensitive, even though I've put wood hardener on a lot of it, which works amazing. This stuff is like unbelievable, but I still want to do as much as I can to protect the wood and not gouge it and treat it nicely. I see a couple more spots that need to be repaired, and oftentimes it's not until you put the first coat of primer on where it's a different color and you can see shadows where little divots are and things you can repair then. But before that, I'd like to use the epoxy as much as possible, and I know that it's going to stick to the wood the best, not necessarily when the primer is on it. So I'm giving this its best shot of living a very long life by doing all the process by direction. So putting the putty or the epoxy right to the wood, it's going to take a couple steps. And now even that I'm looking at, I see a couple cracks in here that could be filled. So I'm going to do one more repair set here on just 2 of these. Everything else is totally done. I've got a couple more windows waiting for some minor repairs, but all I have space for right now is getting complete. So it's taken a long time to get to this point. Using the original wood and then fitting things in with it, adapting, probably takes longer than just building it brand new. But I appreciate the story and the history behind this old wood, so I'm going to do the best I can to keep that story going. It was important to me to complete each part of the process on all surfaces before starting the next. So I filled all the holes, sanded, and cleaned all the surfaces before I even thought about breaking out the paintbrushes. Here's how the joinery came out. I didn't use a single metal screw in the whole entire project. I just used dowel rods, some chopsticks that we brought back from France, and different sizes of dowels that I obtained, and then some scrap wood for the ends where things needed to come together. This piece was the worst looking in the beginning, but now it's looking really nice. It's totally smooth, filled in. I thought this piece was a goner, but it still had the tenons, so I chose to reuse it and try to make everything possible that we could reused again. I did make a mistake, and I cut in to make room for a little bit thicker of an area for the glass to lay on here, but I had to fill in with a piece of heart pine from the old walls. But it's smooth too, and I don't think you're going to be able to tell that that's in there once it's painted. Now here's the difference between the epoxy that I used, and I mixed up, to test some spots, I mixed up some old sawdust from this wood with just the glue. I made a pretty thick mixture of it and then filled in a lot of gaps with it and experimented in some spots, and I prefer the epoxy over the glue filler mixture. That mixture of sawdust and glue is about half and half, and then you add a little bit of water at the end to make it as creamy as you want to, but you get to a consistency that's just like what you would buy in a store for a wood filler. This stuff dries really hard though, and I figure, well, it's got to be sandable, and at least for the purpose of painting over, fill in some good gaps. It doesn't matter about the color being darker, which it is. Even if you use a light pine sawdust that you're sanding, once you mix glue with it and use it as a filler, it's going to darken up. It'll be a little bit darker than the wood that you're putting it on. So you got to account for that. But if you know you're going to paint the wood, it doesn't matter what the color of it is, as long as it works and it's waterproof in this case, since there'll be windows exposed to all the weather for another 100, maybe 200, 300 years, who knows? We finally got to the point where we could prime the wood. It took about a month's worth of work to get around all of the windows that I'm working on to get to that point. Once I was there, it was a really nice feeling to finally get the primer on. And once you start to feel like you're getting someplace, but then once you're in it, you realize, well, I'm only about halfway through this preparation process, because even though the primer looks so good and nice and new and beautiful, there's still some imperfections that show up that you couldn't see before you put the primer on. You can see a lot of shadows and pits and valleys in the wood, so that needed another coat of an epoxy. I used that same 2-part epoxy to fill nail holes and other imperfections around these windows that have happened for many, many years of use and non-use. There's a lot of dings and chips that probably came from the demolition of this place whenever that happened. But that's all fixed now, and the wood is looking very nice and ready for paint. It's probably going to be another month before all of these windows are done. And that includes the one window in the back that I'm going to show you in detail how to refinish from start to finish. We're going to go over the entire thing. In case you want to do it yourself, I'm going to show you all the things that I've learned in this process on that window. So there's been some pitfalls and things that I know you can avoid. You can use my experience to avoid some of these things that will make your life a lot easier if you got one of these old windows, you want to do this in your own home. The first window I started on way back in January was this window here. It took me about a week to get all of the paint off and all the detailed trim. Then I moved on to this one, removed the paint, sanded it. Then I moved back here because I had easy access with the ladder. I could take the boards off daily and then get to know what the process was going to be on these particular windows. Once that was done, I moved over to these 2 front windows, removed the paint, and I haven't started sanding that yet. That will be the last 2 windows I work on. Then we're going to just work our way down the line. Now it's time to attach this to the bottom part of the windowsill. I probably should have done this before I primed, but this has already been primed twice, so no big deal. I'm going to have to pack this with mortar, and we're going to put in place these blocks. I'm going to screw these up into the bottom of the sill to give this something to attach to, and then we're going to continue on with our priming and painting. The years of rain and moisture had deteriorated the mortar surrounding the casing and underneath the sill, so all of that needed to be replaced. And luckily, I had the 2 ingredients I needed to make the mortar on hand. The 2-to-1 ratio of sand and lime powder. There it is. It's all packed in. Looks good. While I was at it, I moved on to the other couple of windows that needed some work. Just completed that to get ahead of the process moving forward. Once the first coat of primer was dry and sanded, I applied a second coat, sanded it again, then flipped the sashes over and started the same process on the other side. It wasn't just the window sashes and the casings, it was also all the little pieces of trim that will need to be reassembled when we put the window back together. I've cleaned off all the dust from sanding. We've done 2 coats of primer, 3 rounds of filling holes and imperfections, and then touch primed or spot primed all those little spots, and now we are ready. We've cleaned up, vacuumed off every piece. I've got a good clean area to work out of. The windows are all ready to go. My 3 most used tools in the last couple of months have been this sander, probably number 2 to this scraper, exactly this scraper. I've used this on several jobs in the last couple of years, this exact one. I just run the sander over it a couple times every few days. It keeps it really sharp. It's an excellent scraper. I've probably used this more than any other tool ever. The last thing I use a lot is this just regular sandpaper. Not this exact one. I go through quite a bit of these because once you get the primer on the windows, you want to hand sand after that. You can use a power sander, but it takes off a lot of the product. So without having to repaint a bunch of times or find a lot of weak spots, hand sanding really does the trick. And when you find out that the oil-based paint that we're using on this with primer fills in a lot of the imperfections and a lot of the gaps in the wood and the holes, the small pinholes, well, you have to do just a little bit of sanding and it smooths it right out. So the final product is what we have here, a extremely smooth surface to accept the paint perfectly. I'll be coating the top coats with this emerald urethane trim enamel. It's good for interior, exterior. It's the same thing I used on the mantle. And yes, those cans of paint are the final chosen colors of the windows, the trim, and the walls. There's a 5-gallon bucket of the wall paint that I've picked up too. I'm going to talk about the colors and how I picked them in the next video. I can't tell you that just yet, but I'm going to start that painting today. I'm really excited about it. I'm getting all my paint from Sherwin-Williams. They are a great company. They do not sponsor this video or have never sponsored any videos. I just like their products a lot, and I get quite a discount there for being a contractor, so I'm able to save a little bit of money on the product there versus other places. So a lot of you ask, why do you use Sherwin-Williams? It may not be the best. Well, it's the best that I can get for the money, I'll tell you that. They have a very fine product. If you've never been into a Sherwin-Williams, we're gonna take a visit to one in the next video too, so you can see kind of what it looks like if you've never been in one. A lot of people overseas have not seen some of these type of stores, I've come to find out. So I thought I'd give you a peek inside a American paint store and show you how we went through the process of picking out the colors. And this Sherwin-Williams paint swatch book really helped out. They have a whole section in the back for historical buildings. I'll show you all about this. Well, friends, I got to get back to it. I'm excited to get this color on these windows today. I'm very excited. This is great because we're finally going to be able to just leave these windows open and get all this natural light in here, and finally it will not look like an abandoned building anymore. It's wild. Thanks for joining me here today, friends. I really appreciate your company, and I'll see you in the next video.